seems everyone who has ever visited the Santa Monica Pier has a story to tell. Having spent over 25 years on the pier, I've certainly heard my share. Some stories resonate more than others, of course. Some are tales of great drama surrounding important events in the pier's history, and some simply transport you to a unique and wonderful era that you wish you had experienced. I'm Jim Harris, Deputy Director of the Santa Monica Pier Corporation, yet perhaps better known as the Pier Historian. And I've had the great benefit of hearing the most fascinating stories about our beloved pier, and I'm taking this opportunity to share those stories told in person with you. There have been so many different groups of people who have declared the Santa Monica Pier as their home, but perhaps none with such a flash of brilliance as that of the Manoa Paddleboard Club of the 1940s. Today we have the great pleasure of visiting with one of that club's champion paddleboard racers, Esther Lorenz Mayer. Esther, thank you for joining me today.
That's my pleasure.
Now, in the late 1930s, a gentleman named Ed Hawkins formed the Manoa Paddleboard Club.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how and why?
Well, he loved paddling himself, and then the other guards out there were building boards and everything, so he thought that he would, they were building them. Pete Peterson was building them where he developed the paddleboard club.
Pete Peterson being a famous lifeguard.
Yes, a famous lifeguard, and he was a world champion, and he held the Pacific Coast Championship at the same time I did. And so, you know, I've known him since I was a little girl. You know, he came to the restaurant to eat. And so he built dories for dory racing for the guards, and he held the championship. So he hung out. But first, he was building boards where the Manoa Paddleboard Club was at second level of the pier, and so he was building boards down there. And then he got a building on top of the pier. So Ed took over.
And the lower
yes,
level,
the lower section, and made a paddleboard club. And that's where I met, you know, Ed and Dorothy.
Okay. Dorothy
Hawkins, his daughter. So she was, I didn't enter into it until 1946. And Dorothy was just a champion. She never missed, she never lost a race.
That's what I've heard.
Never. And so, except for when I did it. But I talked to her about it, and I says, you know, I felt bad because everything kind of split up after I left. And a number of girls left. They joined Janet Dee's water ballet. And so I said, I didn't know how you felt about me, because Jim, you started the Manoa, and she had said only people who belong to the Manoa and people affiliated with are to be there. And so she didn't want a bunch of looky-loos, you know. So I went to see her, and she says, Esther, you deserved winning that race. I said, I always felt bad because I didn't know what happened. I asked Eleanor, how come Dorothy, where is she? She should have won this race. And she says, no, she was sick and she didn't, you know, continue. She didn't, you know, she dropped out. And so I talked to Dorothy about that, and I said, well, I felt bad. And she said, because you trained me. And she says, Esther, I was not feeling good that day at all. And my father was, well, get in the race. He was very hard on her. So he says, you get in the race. And so she didn't even know until that moment that it was a 6-mile race. So she says, no way would I race 6 miles. She didn't she liked fast sprints, not,
she was a sprinter.
Not long distance. So she says, so you earned it, Esther. And she says, I'm not going to take that from you. And so we were friends, really developed our friendship back again, and it's wonderful to see her.
Good, very
good.
Now the club, so the club was a racing club. You raced each other? Did you race other clubs? Not just for
racing. We just had fun. We paddled all over, and there would be some races, and then.
And you raced each other, or you raced other
clubs? We just paddled together. There was no other clubs.
Okay.
That was it. And so we would just go out paddling and go out by the rocks, and then maybe we'd slip off the boards and take our faceplates along and skin dive. And we were always down there just having fun, taking that swing and swinging out in the ocean, drop off and fall in, you know. And it was just a lot of fun. So her and I would always, you know, she really taught me a great deal. I was only 14, actually, yeah, 14. I joined in 46.
Okay.
And so the early 46. And then she would say, you know how to sail yet? And I said, no, I don't know how. I was 14 and she's 17, and she was really an aquatics woman. But I was a strong aquatics person too. So she said, I'm going to teach you how to sail. And all the guys, they had a place next to theirs that just sailboats, that the city, you know, rented spaces to people with sailboats. So all the guys would say, anytime you want to use our sailboats, take it. They were small sailboats. So she says, come on, we're going to go sailing. And so I followed her everywhere because she was so much fun. And so we'd go sailing, and all of a sudden, there's some yachts parked out beyond the rocks. And she says, look, she says, we're heading right for that boat. I said, we're getting too close. And she says, no, we're okay. And we didn't come within a foot. And she says, oh, the rudder's come up. Oh, the rudder. And I went, and just at the last moment, she put it in and turned on a dime. And I said, if you do that again, I'm going to jump out of this boat. So we were going back the other way, and she says, I'm going to do it again. So I said, if you get close to that boat, I'm going to jump. You're going to hit that boat. And so she starts, and she's aiming right for it again, scaring the heck out of me. And turned that thing on a dime. Out came the rudder, and she's, oh my God, the rudder's out of the water, and just a foot from the boat. She slammed it in and turned, and I dove out. I said, I'm not going to hit that boat. And so I dove out, and then she turns around and she laughs. She says, bye-bye, sucker. Yeah. And she went back to the paddleboard club and left me out there, but I was a good swimmer, and she knew that. So I swam in front of the pier, down the side, and got back to the club. I said, you're mean, you know. And so she would take, there was one friend that she would take home, and he lived in Venice. And so she said, we're going to give him a ride home. And then she dropped me off afterwards. And she would be going down the alleyway, the speedway, and she'd say, oh, look. She said, there's someone walking down there. And she would turn the key off, and that would make a big backfire. She had a Model A. And it would big backfire, and she was just so much fun. She was just rowdy, you know, and I just loved her, you know.
So it was more than just paddleboarding. It was really playing in the water and playing around the pier.
Yeah.
And that's what you did a lot.
We just had a wonderful time.
Such a wonderful time.
Yeah.
It does sound like it.
Yeah.
Now about your 1947 race. You joined the club in 1946, and you won the 1947 race, which you mentioned was a 6-mile race.
Yes, it was grueling.
I'm trying to picture a 6-mile race. You left from the pier, and where would you
go
for 6 miles?
Well, in those days, there was a lighthouse just past Chautauqua, where you go up the Palisades. About maybe a quarter of a mile down, there was a big lighthouse, and we went to the lighthouse and back. And and then Tommy guided us. He rowed all the way, and he had like a flag up on his boat so we could see our way, you know, because we're going like this through the swells. So you're really paddling a little more than 6 miles. So
how do you pace yourself for 6 miles? I mean, that's a physical.
I was extremely good. I'd been running the beaches since I was a little tiny kid, you know, and swimming, you know, and paddling and kayaking and doing all the things that kids should be doing, and so it was a grueling race.
And you were 14 years old.
Yeah, I was in good shape for it.
Your competitors were how old?
They were older. Everybody was older.
Everybody is older?
Yeah. Edna Rivers was probably 23. And then Eleanor and some of the girls were 16, 17 years old. So I was the youngest in the race.
And you beat them all.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well,
do you still have the trophy?
Yeah, I do, but it's broken. So I said, Rich, you got to get that fixed so Jim can display it, you know. So, yeah. So we had just an enormously good time down there. And then in the summertime, we'd go down there and stay till 8 o'clock at night. And then she'd give a few of the kids a ride home, and I'd go with her, and then she'd drop me off on the way back.
Dottie. Everything seemed to revolve around Dottie.
Oh, we did revolve around Dottie. She was, I mean, her father was a bit to the crabby side, so we all stayed away from him. But Dorothy was just so much fun. You know, she surfed, and she taught me just about everything I knew in paddleboarding, you know. So we just had a great time.
Now, the club in the 1940s, it received a lot of media attention. It also received a lot of attention from celebrities. Who were the celebrities that would hang around the club?
I didn't know too many of the celebrities. Johnny Weissmuller was always there.
Tarzan.
Buster Crabbe. Yeah, he was
Tarzan.
And then the young Johnny Sheffield, who was Boy for Tarzan, you know, in the movies. And then I'm trying to think of some, John Hall. He was a star. He was the star of the movie Hurricane. Oh. And then his double was Paul Stater, who was he worked at the studios. He did all kinds of double work, you know, doubling work for all aquatics people. And then Pete Peterson, you know, was around there enough. And And I don't remember any more of the important people, you know.
What was the appeal? Why were these people drawn to the club?
Oh, because it was fun. You know,
Yeah.
you hung out there, you got paddled all over the bay, and they dove off the pier, and then they would take their diving gear. You know, they would skin dive off the boards out past the rocks. There was not a lot, but you would skin dive and pick up starfish and pick up sand dollars and different things like that. And so everybody was having just a good time, and it was a good workout paddling around.
Sure.
And it seemed to be a very big attraction right at the end of the war. And the men were all gone to war, so it was pretty dull up to that time. And as soon as they start coming back, then it got very lively, and the pier became very popular. And you had the big band up on the pier.
You had Spade Cooley playing on the pier, right?
And so lots of people were coming, and they were interested in the paddleboard club. So it was going over pretty good.
Sure. Well, it tied the water and the pier
right.
together
and the paddling
in a very
and,
fun way.
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of the guys had sailboats also attached, and they keep saying they invented things. Well, these guards and these guys were inventing things like I have the paddleboard that you use, with a faceplate built in. And I was walking down the pier one day to see what was going on. I had my bathing suit. I'd always leave the restaurant and walk to the pier, and I'd see if there was good skin diving or whatever. And there was Cap and Pete, and they said, "Esther, come over here. We want to show you something." And I went over, and I said, and they put a faceplate in Cap's paddleboard, and that's the one you display.
Sure, I've seen that board
every year on the pier. And he says, "You want to try it?" I said, "It's fantastic, because you wouldn't have to stop your board, look in with faceplate to see what you got. If there's something new down there, you had a faceplate, and you just keep paddling until you saw something." And so he built it primarily for up at he had a home on the beach in Trancas. I think it was Trancas that he was at. And so he would, the guys they'd get lobsters wherever they were diving, and they would all drop in front of Cap's house. And so there was tons of lobsters out there, and he'd have lifeguard parties. And he invited the water ballet girls too. And then they have a big party down there. He was very generous with his place that he lived in. It was very unique. He built it himself, and it was very unique. And so all these lobsters, the guys would go out and dive and get the lobsters, and they'd make a great big Caesar salad, and we'd all have a big party at his place. Every year he was having lifeguard parties. And
sounds like fun.
Oh, we just had a wonderful time.
Good. We're going to take a little break right now, and we'll be back with more of Esther's story about the Manoa Paddleboard Club.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Santa Monica Pier. My name is Mary Pat Cooney, and I'm here today to offer you a walking tour of the pier, sharing with you all the stories that I can remember of its 100-year history.
Scandals, there's fishing, there's surfing, there's boats, there's police. It's a slice of American life on the pier.
Welcome back. We left off with Esther telling us all about how fun the Manoa Paddleboard Club was, but it was more than just fun. You actually had to work a little, and somehow developed this wonderful paddleboard ballet that I've seen these amazing photos of. And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Dorothy started it.
Dorothy started it.
On the 4th of July in '46, the pier was crowded with people, and so she put candles on the front of the board and sparklers, and all of us went out and did figure eights and followed you know, followed her around, and there was quite a few of us, probably 12 of us.
Putting on a show.
And putting on a little show for the people on the pier. And then she was developing it more, and we would practice right below the Paddleboard Club. You've seen, you know, the different formations that were taking place, you know. And so we were doing that, and then she got there was a water show being developed, and I don't know how she got involved, but she was the director. And so she went, it was at the, it was really called the Olympic Stadium in SC, right next to SC. There's a big, it's a giant pool with high platform diving. And that's where all the Olympic divers practice. And still the Olympic people would practice there. So they put on this water show, and she directed it. And Janet D was sort of assisting, and she wasn't involved that much yet. And so Dorothy was starting this. And then her, Janet D and her father developed a partnership, and it didn't go over. And so by this time we were working at the pier, you know, with the water ballet.
Janet D and Ed Hawkins had a partnership.
Yeah, they had
Dorothy's father.
developed some kind of a partnership. And so then they, it didn't work out. And so most of the girls went over with her, because she was a former dancer with the Follies way back in the 20s. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so she got most of the girls, and by this time he was upset because I guess he lost money in the deal or something. So he's very upset, so he started kind of picking on everybody. He was just angry. And so Dorothy left shortly. I didn't know that, but she left shortly after I left, and then Eleanor left. And Janet D called us and said, will you come to my water ballet? And,
so the Manoa Club dissolved?
Yeah, the Manoa Club went on for a little while, but it didn't last too long. And Dorothy left at 17, and Eleanor, she was, so I was only 14, so the average girls were 15, 16, and 17. So Eleanor went with Janet D, and then she called me, and I went with her. And that's that day you saw Dorothy paddling out.
Yes.
I was sitting back there. That's the day she called me and said, please come down, we're taking publicity pictures. So they were breaking away from each other at that time. So her father wouldn't let her stay with Janet D, which rightfully she should have, because she was the best. And so we traveled for 5 years together. All the girls.
Janet D's?
Oh yeah, with Janet D, and she was able to, we went with Crosby's Aqua Follies to Chicago for a month.
Right.
And it didn't pan out because when he got there was a union strike going on, and they had to put up big, giant portable pool, and they had arranged the whole thing. And it was all Olympic divers all went. And then there was another guy who did gymnastics work at Muscle Beach there, and he and this other woman did beautiful adagio work, and they did work that was unbelievable on the top.
Adagio on the boards?
Yeah, and they had top platforms up over this portable giant pool, and in Chicago, and so he did, he would flip her in the air and then drop her down over, and it's a high platform. And it was just the most, they had, special lights on them, and it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And then we gave a water show, and then the divers from all the Olympic divers came, and also some of the stunt divers. And so it was just a wonderful water show. And so, but because of the strike, Larry Crosby went back on the train with us, and he was Bing Crosby's business manager. It was his brother. And so he said, we didn't make the money we'd hoped for, and we're not going to continue on, because if we're going to run into things like this, we can't afford, it cost us too much, because the city would, back there, the union stepped in, and they would not let anyone that we, had put the pool together, do everything. So they had to, and then we had to hire some girls that were water ballet girls in the show, or they wouldn't let us go on. See, so it was a very bad thing that happened. So they came back, and we continued to travel with this water show we went everywhere. We went to the finest hotels and resorts, and it was...
Where was everywhere? What
well, the Shadow Mountain Club was one of them in Palm Springs. That was a new beautiful club. And so we went there number of times. And then we went to San Diego, and the big hotel that's out on the beach there on the island, Del Coronado Hotel. It's a very luxurious hotel.
Sure.
And so the thing about it was we'd give water shows, and then we got to have dinner with whatever it was, maybe a big banquet going on for some purpose, a buyer's convention or a oilman's convention, and that's why we were giving these shows. And we gave one down there for the Navy, the officers. They had this great big luau, and we went. That was another show we gave down there. I guess San Diego we went maybe 5 times, and we went as far as San Jose, you know, just in Palm Springs numerous times, the Shadow Mountain Club and a couple other places, and every big hotel, Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and Dorothy and I, we gave a water show there, Dorothy's first water show before the Janet D. ever entered the picture. She was doing this paddling around the pier there, and started that water ballet, but she asked me to go into a water show with her, and I was just 14. I just ran that race. In fact, no, it was in 46 before the race. So 46, I was just a little tomboy. You know, I only weighed about 100, and you wouldn't look at it now, but I weighed about 106 pounds because I was very active.
Sounds
about
like you were her protege.
5'2" or 5'3", see? And so she says, I'm going to give a water show at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Would you be my partner? And I said, sure. So we demonstrated paddling, tandem together, and then every kind of turn that's possible. We did them all. Straddled boards, side, your feet over the side, with your arms alone. You know, everything that you could display on a board, we did. And then she had practiced with me, and I was supposed to fall in the deep end, and she was going to race across the pool and grab me and pull me up and show you how lifeguards can save people using paddleboards. It wasn't thought of then. And so she did it. And but some famous person was there and said, I want my son to do it. And so I said, I don't care, Dorothy, it's okay. So I sat on the sidelines, and this little boy fell in the water, and she raced over to save him, and nobody told the lifeguard. The lifeguard jumped in and saved him. And so Dorothy laughed, you know, and she said, well, we were supposed to show him what you could do with the paddleboard. So they showed him how she would pull him in and save him, you know. So it was, you know, just a tremendous experience on my part.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult thing that you ever did on a board? Was it the 6-mile race, or was it something to do with the
Probably
ballet?
the 6-mile race.
6-mile race?
Very few people made it back. There was about, I estimate 23 people started the race. And there was only about, let's see, 3, 4, 5 that I know of. The sixth one came in much later, you know.
So with the ballet, what type of exercise, what would you do on the board that would be particularly challenging?
You would put your legs in the air like this, you know, straight up. And then that's the outboard girls. And then the girls, there'd be boards on the inboard side, and they'd stand up and form a formation. And then we did hula, and Joanne D. would be doing the hula, and we would, you know, synchronize with her, all the boards would, you know, be around her. And then we would do like a marching one, some marching music, you know, it was Stars and Stripes, I think the name was the music. And so we had different routines that we did. And it was about 5 different routines. And then they would maybe do, they weren't all, well, sometimes it was one right after another, or maybe they'd have somebody diving for a while, but most of the time it was one after another, but they were different types of routines. One was like a military routine, another one was a Hawaiian, and another one was where there'd be people on the outside holding boards, and the girls were inside holding hands in a circle, and we'd be paddling them around in a circle, you know. And there was, you know, different routines that we went through, just like your choreography, just like a dancing routine, you know. So it was just tremendous memories. And we traveled 5 years together. We just went everywhere.
5 years.
Palm Springs, went to Las Vegas, went to Mexico, went to, you know.
And then after 5 years, that club dissolved as well?
And then everybody says, what happened? Well, all the girls had boyfriends by now. Same thing as Dorothy, and they were the first to leave. Dorothy and Georgina. She didn't go to the water ballet because she was dating Tommy, and he's, I don't want you to, you know. And so, excuse me. So Georgina didn't stay with the ballet. I did, Eleanor Monnier did, and then it was all other newer girls. So, so we.
But boys got in the way.
But 5 years was enough,
Yeah.
and so we just didn't want to stay any longer because we all had very serious, you know, boyfriends. We were all they were all 16, 17 years old, and by 17, that's the end. You fall in love, and you're
Sure.
yeah.
So it all ended.
So it started ending then.
And then did you all just go your separate ways? You've been in touch with one another
that's
since?
what, and everybody did. Except graduated from high school, and everybody went their own way. And so I never was in contact with any of the girls.
But you've recently been in touch with
Dorothy
Dottie
and
with
Eleanor, and it was just like we were never apart.
And even Tom Volk.
And Tommy and Georgina.
and
Well, we
Georgina,
knew each other
and
very well from the
yes,
Paddleboard Club.
I was there for your
and
reunion
so,
last summer.
you know, it was just wonderful to see them, and none of them have not changed. Everybody's still rowdy, and you know, rowdy tomboys.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, you know, just we got together and hit it off immediately. So it was nice.
That is nice.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I'll be seeing Dorothy. You know, she's not well at all, so I'll go down to see her as often as I can.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And you know, I was there for your reunion with Tom and Georgina, and it was
Yes.
just a wonderful moment. The three
Yeah,
of you.
yeah.
you
And well,
know.
Tommy was a lifeguard,
Right.
and he was a good paddler.
Mhm.
And so I think he raced dories too. The lifeguards race dory boats, you know.
And we've had him on this show.
And you what?
I've had him on this show.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's been such a fascinating time listening to you talk about the Manoa paddleboard,
Yeah,
Esther, and
yeah.
I really appreciate you coming down
Well,
and sharing time with me today.
It's been good. Good memories.
Please join me next time for more Santa Monica Pier stories.